Welcome all of you to the Institute of Public Knowledge. I'm Eric Kleinenberg. I am the director here, also Professor of Sociology. The IPK, for those of you who are new to the place, is a university-wide institute. We try to do big research programs and public programming on a whole variety of topics, but we're especially interested in issues that have real significance and interest to the community of scholars and students here at NYU, and that transcend the university and are relevant to people in many communities we're embedded in. So, maybe some programs on climate change, on the future of democracy, on artificial intelligence in society, on the future of work, on race and public space. The kinds of things that get you in trouble with the federal government. So we're looking for something that would be a little more approachable and maybe less controversial. But the reality is, we've always felt here that there's a problem in the university, which is that we kind of collectively fail to appreciate that sports are not just the thing that students do, professional athletes do, sports are a massive part of our culture. By me, I know. And we haven't figured out the best ways to take sports seriously as an object of analysis in our research and our teaching. And so there's this discordance that we're trying to address. And in the context of that, a few things happen. One of them is that we have a PhD student here in sociology named Hoynes. He's here in the room. He told me one day that his father, who I'd met at a NFL football game 20 years ago, and was the dean at Vassar College and also a cultural sociologist, with his father had just written this book called More Than Just the Games, about the sports industry. And I thought that was fascinating. And one reason I thought that was fascinating is that I'm not just a New York University professor, I'm also a New York City parent. And I have this very vivid memory of my 7-year-old son finishing a season at a small soccer club not too far from us, and having the coaches tell us at the end of the season, listen, we think your kid could be a pretty good soccer player, but he really only comes 2 to 3 days a week. And everyone knows practices are 5 days a week, and there's a game on Saturday. And his best friend didn't make the team for the next year. We're in age 7 here. He's just not, we don't really see it in him. We do think that your son has a future, but you need to commit to come for 6 days a week. And probably to catch him up to speed, you should get a private coach to help him with the job. And I grew up at a time when the idea was, you should play sports, and sports are wonderful, but you should play 3 different sports, one sport for every season. It should be social, it should be casual. As you got older, maybe you'd specialize. And here I was being told at age 7, it really is time for you to get serious about this, if this is something you want to do. And it was at that moment that I realized that the landscape ahead of me, the whole youth sports landscape, was just fundamentally different than the one that I grew up with. I wasn't there to make a judgment about whether it was a better thing or worse thing, or all kinds of differences. But I just clearly didn't understand what I was about to go through, raising this one child who was a soccer player and another child who wanted to grow into other sports later. So I developed an interest that was both practical and also kind of academic. What are we doing here when we do these things in the United States? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the risks? What are the potential benefits and rewards? How do we get the system? How do we make sense of it and live with it today? Those are burning questions for a lot of people. I'm just curious, how many of you are participating in the youth sports world in one way or another these days? Okay. So a bunch of people who have skin in the game. We're going to invite you to share your perspective a little bit later. The event tonight is really meant to help us think through that stuff. So we have to begin Professor Bill Hoynes from Vassar to talk about his book. And I thought who would be great to have in conversation. Bill, and it turns out that we have a wealth of real expertise just on this campus and the blocks. So after Bill speaks, we're then going to turn the mic over to Kim Wyatt, who is the head coach of the NYU men's soccer team. She was, for a time, the only female head coach of a men's NCAA soccer program, first and only. That's not by any means her most interesting accomplishment in life, she was also the goalie for the U.S. women's national team, maybe the first U.S. women's national team, which isn't so bad. And in addition to those amazing characteristics and accomplishments, her daughter is a soccer player on Emory, which is the second-ranked team in NCAA Division III soccer tournament that starts Thursday or Friday? Friday this week. Not bad for Kim Wine. So then, like, who has the standing to follow Kim Wine after this? Well, it turns out that Kevin McCarthy, who's the executive director of Dusk, the Downtown United Soccer Club. Any Dusk people in the house tonight? Okay, a couple Dusk people in the house, so just be careful. This night of truth telling, we've got Dusk in the house. So Kevin, he was himself a soccer player, a college player on Columbia University's team, which I think is the last and maybe the only Ivy League soccer team to make it to the NCAA Division I finals, where they lost to Indiana in a game that we all want to forget. But Kevin stayed with it. He went out to coach at Columbia, both the men's and women's team. Raised a son, Wyatt, who went to the same soccer club where my son played. And we have a distinguished former college director there, Steve Halo, in the room. And Wyatt went on to play soccer at Amherst last year, won the 33 national championship. Now, Kevin is the executive director of Dusk, which is this massive player in the New York City youth sports community. On the boys' side and also on the girls' side, it's a big force. So Kevin will jump in and talk. Then at the end of this, we'll open it up. We'll have some conversation. And in the back, you probably noticed as you came in, we have copies of Bill's book. We have this tradition at IPK. We make sure that all of our programming is free for everyone who comes in, except for the undergraduates who pay $90,000 for it. And all we ask of you is that when you're done tonight, do everything possible to make sure that the bookseller doesn't have to carry a big box of books home. So get a book, and I'm sure Bill will be happy to sign it. And I'm going to ask you to stay here and just invite Bill to the podium. Welcome to NYU.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see lots of familiar faces. And know that I'm among soccer royalty. So I'm a sociology professor, and I study contemporary media and culture. And both my kids are in. So I also was a youth sports parent for a long time. I coached soccer, basketball, baseball. I've been involved in administrator of Little League for 25 years, even though I'm in my 60s. My kids are 30 and over. I'm still running Little League. So when I was at a point maybe 5-6 years ago thinking about a new research project, I was talking with a colleague of mine who's an education professor at Vassar, and we were talking about how we have spent a lot of time around kids' sports, and some of what Eric said was what we were talking about. Two 50-something parents, kids out of the house, spent a lot of our younger lives around the sidelines, coaching, talking lots of parents, talking lots of coaches. I'll tell you a quick story I thought on the train ride down. I just came down from the kids today. On the train ride down, I was remembering the last time I ever coached a youth baseball game. The sport I know best is baseball, although I did spend a lot of time around soccer, and I coached high school basketball. But the last time I ever coached a youth baseball game, and there might be a couple of people in the room who were here for this, maybe one. And it was a late October night, probably 2000, maybe 1999. It was like 20 degrees. And it was the first game of the doubleheader. And it was 9:30 at night on Friday night. And I was coaching 13 months. At some point near the end of the first game, one of the players came rounded third base. I stopped them. I was coaching third base. And they looked at me and said, "Why are we here?" And I said, "What do you mean? Why are we playing doubleheader? It's only the sixth inning of the first game." And they said, "Everyone's freezing, and it's really late, and we've been here waiting to get on the field since like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What do we do?" And I think I really pushed it aside, and we played the rest of the game. We played terrible the rest of the game, the rest of the second game, And at the end, way back, I said, we're not going to play anymore. It's too cold, too dark. You can imagine like now how early it gets dark now. And then I never coached another game. The team broke up. So that's 25 years ago. It stuck with me all this time. I'm probably wrong. It's 2010. I'm looking at how old it is. It's 2010. So it was 15 years ago. Stuck with me all this time that I never really asked that question when I was doing it. What do we do? You're just out there playing, having fun, thinking about what was next. So that's a long introduction to say, sometime 5, 6, 7 years ago, Chris Bjork and I decided that we were going to do a sociological study in the schools. We spent about 2 years following 4 youth teams, a boys soccer team, a girls soccer team, a girls, and they're young, so girls is appropriate, probably not women, they're young teams, a girls basketball team, and a boys baseball team. We spent a lot of time around the players and parents and families and observing practices and games and the rest. We also went to about a dozen tournaments in the Hudson Valley and did surveys with 500 some odd parents. And then we spent a couple of years interviewing 100 or so parents, a bunch of coaches, and a bunch of college coaches. And after we did all that work, we decided we don't really want to write an academic book because what we learned, and this is echoing what Eric said in the introduction, what we learned is that so many parents were telling us we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. We signed our kids up for soccer when they were 6, or for baseball when they were 9. And then the next thing we knew, we were doing it every day of the week, every weekend, year-round, paying many thousands of dollars a year for something that we thought it didn't resemble to them or to us what it was like when we were kids. So what we decided we were going to do is try to write a popular book. It turns out, and maybe Eric will have tips for that, that's really hard, especially when you're training as an academic, to write a popular book. So that's what this is. This is an effort to try to speak to people who actually are involved in the kids' sports world, not to sociologists who are studying the kids' sports world. That's actually been challenging for me because my sociology friends say what you do. But it's been more interesting for me. And what I want to just quickly highlight 4 or 5 things that we talk about in the book, and maybe some of you will be interested in talking about. First, we talk about how the youth sports industry has changed. Back in as late as the 1990s, maybe even the very early 2000s, youth sports was mostly organized locally by recreational clubs, often public funded. Over the last 20 years, that shifted to regional and national private clubs that are very expensive and require significant cost outlays. And so, I mean, Eric had mentioned some of this, but I'll just say, I remember when Ben was 7, he was recruited to play in a travel team. I never heard of what a travel team was. And I began to learn what a travel team was. This was a very low-end travel team. The higher-end travel teams have paid coaches. I recall taking a group of baseball players to a tournament, and when we got there, there was a coach of the other squad was a former Major League Baseball player. And they had flown players in just for the first weekend, the first Saturday of the weekend games from California to play. And then they were leaving to another tournament. So the paid coaches, which some of you maybe were my age, remember when you were kids there were not paid coaches? Your parents coached, or the older parent who used to have a kid who was still into it coached. A lot of travel, so hotels, meals, flights, other things. Private trainers. Almost all the top players have private trainers, and a lot of the non-top players have private trainers. I remember being around private trainers who were trying to convince players that they were top players, and I would be watching and realizing maybe they're not. The skill level was quite modest. Very specific skills coaches, a goalkeeper coach, an infield coach, in addition to your trainer. Elite summer camps, they could be called all kinds of things, but that's often the terminology that's used. And one of the things that we found really interesting in our research is we found that parents pretty frequently talked about, when their kids were 10, 11, 12, talked about managing their children's athletic careers when they were back at that age. So we began trying to think about, so what is this industry? This very entrepreneurial industry. When we wrote the book, which is now, I think we finished writing it 2 years ago, 18 months ago, the estimates for the youth sports industry is a $20 billion industry. I've heard that it's much larger now, even just the last couple of years, that it's multiple $1 billion larger, which is that the scale is quite large in a way that is very surprising to me. I don't even know what the billion is, right? I mean, you have losses that are trillion. $20 billion is a very large industry. So that's one. Two is really increased pressure over just the last 2 decades or so for young athletes to specialize. Again, echoing Eric's point, it was a common thing that a range of people involved in youth sports, regardless of what they thought they were going to be doing 2 years or 5 years or 8 years later, were probably playing a different sport each season. They weren't deciding that they were going to focus and be trained in one and play that one. Now, of course, there are stories. There are relatively small number of stories. There are stories of people who specialize at a very young age and are incredibly successful. And then you hear the stories, I don't know, maybe it's like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. You hear the stories of people who dedicated their whole lives to something and thrive. But there are many, many more stories of people who specialized at a young age, got injured, had dealt with stress. There's significant research that shows that there are real mental health concerns about young athletes specializing at too young an age, burnout, quitting at a young age, etc. But there's more and more of a sense that if you want to succeed in this, what seems like a pretty high stakes game, that picking your sport, not doing other activities. Now there may be other sports like, dance may be like this, music may be like this. It's not just sports. It may be a whole range of these activities that encourage, that if you're going to encourage young people and their parents as they're going to succeed, they should really focus only on that one item. But despite these stories we hear of the prodigies, the generally speaking, and I'll quickly note, the increased risk of injury caused by overuse has become an epidemic in recent years. And I'll be curious to know if Kim or Kevin have anything to say about this. When we interviewed college coaches, one of the things we learned is that those both Division III and Division I college coaches told us when they recruit, they prefer multi-sport athletes, at least through most of their youth, because they want people that are well-rounded athletes. They want people that are not going to be as prone to injury, and that particularly when I talk to Division III coaches, they said that they fit better with the culture of the school if they're multi-sport athletes. The third thing I just want to quickly note is the increased sense that the amount of time and resources that parents are putting into their kids' sports starting at a very young age is perceived by parents as an investment in the future. And what do I mean by that? It really comes down to a sense that it's an investment in the likelihood of getting a scholarship. So in our survey of over 500 parents, I was quite surprised to learn that more than 55% of those that we surveyed believed that their child was going to play in college. Even the parents of kids under 10, it was more than 50% believed that their child was going to play in college. It's pretty young to be thinking that, the kids are going to be when they're 18, 19 years old. And for those that thought their child was very likely to play in college, almost 60% believed that their child was going to get a college scholarship. So the actual numbers are about 1 in 7 young athletes playing in college, about 1 in 50 get played in Division I school and get some kind of scholarship. So the numbers are very small, but half or more of the parents have a sense that this is what's happening. Now this might be explained partly by the high cost of college. Right? When we talk to parents, one of the things that we learn is people are saying, how am I going to afford to send my kid to school? And there was a sense that if we invest all of this money and make them an elite athlete, that might be enough to pay for college. Many of you are NYU related. It's not clear that, first off, that's very uncommon that happens, but it's probably not the case that investment pays off anywhere near as much as an academic investment pays in terms of what kind of financial aid and merit-based aid there is out there. Okay, so the fourth thing I want to quickly note is one of the things we learned, which is it very much resonates with my experience. We learned it from almost all the parents we talked to, was a sense that they built real meaningful social ties in their youth sports communities. I'm looking around, and some of the people here, I know their parents because you all played with my kids. And I've known their parents forever, and they're people who have considered me their friends. And so we found people that do holidays with their youth sports fellow parents. They travel on weekends together all the time, and these become like core social networks. And we coined this term mobile neighborhood. We argue that youth sports has become for people who don't have neighborly relations in their geographic neighborhood, that they have these kind of close personal relations in their youth sports network. And then one of the things that's most interesting is when the kids stop playing, they're often into real experience of loss. Even parents talk about grieving, and they weren't just grieving that they couldn't watch their kid play soccer, although they were. And they joked they wanted to watch their kid play job. But they were grieving the network that they lost, the friendship, the community that they lost. And so it's something that we thought was really worth honoring that's the case. And then I think I'm going to try and wrap up pretty quickly. Another thing that we found that came up, I guess I would say organically, we didn't ask about this. The vast majority of parents told us that what they valued most about their kids' sports experience was what their term that people came up on their own was the quote life lessons that they took. People were grappling with all of the time and money and energy and commitment they put in. And we talked to most of the parents we talked to, their kids were late or after their youth sports. We did at the end try to talk to people with younger kids, but they were less interested in talking about it because they didn't have as much to say. They were just still trying to figure it out. So many of these parents, I would say almost all the parents we talked to, described a pretty consistent set of themes that are probably going to be familiar to you if you're interested in sports. One is resilience. They feel like their kids learn resilience. Two is experiencing failure. Their kids are, or many of you we talk to, the kids thrive in all kinds of ways, and sports was a place where they failed. And they failed in ways that they learned from, and their parents felt like their kids grew from that experience of failure. Three is was recognizing the significance of doing something over and over again, what I'm going to call practice and patience, that you don't get good at something right away, that you have to invest your time and your focus, and that a lot of parents said, my kid learned how to take something seriously, how to really practice at something, that they think will have valuable benefits then in all kinds of experiences outside of sports as an adult. In addition, people talk about teamwork and collaboration. Now I feel like I'm talking about something like that. Isn't this one of the main job skills that I hear people say is most essential for young people today, is being able to collaborate and work in teams? And what I heard from parents is, that's what our kids learn. Our kids learn all about collaboration and teamwork by playing sports, and not so much about individualism. And then finally, I would say the other lesson that was regularly referred to was the ability to be coached. To have someone give you criticism, to learn from that criticism and be able to take constructive criticism. Not an easy thing for a lot of people to do. As a college professor, I'm looking around at some other college professors, I find that my students are struggling with that. Taking criticism, wanting criticism, and sometimes that means getting something less than an A is perceived as that, but even feedback, written feedback that is critical. And so we heard from these parents over and over again about that being something they felt like their kids learned a lot from by participating in this often really complicated, highly emotional, high-stakes world of sports. Okay, I think I'm just going to stop in 1 minute and say, ultimately what we hope this book does, and what we were trying to do, was basically write a book that is something we wish we had when our kids were 6. So that, because we were, one of the things that again, if there are parents out here whose kids are involved in sports, I sort of feel like I was going with the crowd. And I'm not someone who goes with the crowd. I didn't know what to do. But, the neighbors told me there's this great team your kid could play on. Why don't you get involved and coach this team, etc. But there wasn't a clear sense of, like, what is this industry? How does it work? Who's involved in it? What's going to come of it? We hope that if people pick this up and read it, that they'll have some sense of what the structure of the youth sports world is, what the opportunities are, and how a range of other parents have navigated this, and I hope people find that helpful. So, and one of the things that I find helpful is talking to other people about kids sports or different experiences. So I think I'm going to stop and turn this over to Kim.
I'm going to buy like a ton of these books and just hand them out to as many parents as I can. And I have been involved in sports since I was a little kid, and all the things that you spoke about how much the industry has changed is so resonating with me, because I grew up in a park system where supervised by complete strangers, who was paid by taxpayer dollars, and now I'm involved in this industry that is, like they're saying, $20 billion, and my inbox is just flooded with constant emails for kids looking for opportunities at even the Division III level. And I've coached at every level. I've coached in the youth arena. I've played in the youth arena. I've played on the women's national team. I've been a scholarship athlete at the University of Central Florida when women's soccer was starting. And I've seen the growth in the women's game, but also in the industry of soccer specifically. Women's soccer now has 9 World Cups behind us since I started playing. We have 8 Olympic Games since I started playing. We have multiple fully invested NCAA soccer at every level, Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, which you maybe never even heard of, junior college, Division I, junior college, Division II, plus all these other multiple sports that we're talking about, baseball, basketball, go down the list. And now I've been a parent who literally, when my kids were younger, I'm saying, okay, what do I want for my children? What do I want for them? It's like, wait a minute, time out. It's not what I want for my kids. What do they want? Like, what do they want? So I had to kind of check myself. What do they want? I want as a parent to introduce my kids to sport. Especially, I have 2 girls. And I think it's really, really important for sport, but I think especially for female sports. And it made such a huge difference in my life. So that's what I wanted for my children. Could I expose them to sport? And would they like it? Could I expose them to multiple types of sports and let them choose and let it kind of grow organically what they wanted to do? That's really how I tried to guide my own children in their development in sport. My daughter ended up really liking soccer, and I love that. I love that she loves soccer. It's something that we share together. My youngest daughter also loves soccer, and she was really good at it, but she loved gymnastics more. And so we just wanted to be parents that could support whatever our children were deciding to do with their athletic development. But honestly, I was wearing my parent hat a lot, and then of course I was wearing my coaching hat a lot. I wanted to coach the kids when they were younger because I knew that I could provide an environment for them that was really like growth oriented, really in the best interest of the kids, really provide a great experience for them and for the parents at like whatever, 7, 8, and 9, and 10 years old. And that's what I wanted. Player development. What can I teach? What can we help these kids learn at a super, super young age? But even then, I felt the pressure. I was a parent coach with a lot of experience. And I felt the pressure of the other parents. Oh my God, we've got this great experienced coach. What does this mean for my kid at 9 years old? Right? I could see that, I could feel that in the parents. And honestly, candidly, and Kevin's going to speak to the youth soccer part of this, is like the amount of leagues that were popping up, the amount of capitalism that was happening, the amount of pressure specialized at an early age, get fitness coaches, get specialized coaches. I could see all of that. And then I was, at times as a professional, I was even confused about all of these leagues and what did they mean and where do you go and why did they keep populating. So I feel your pain as parents. It's super, super confusing. So I can speak as a college coach from that perspective, whatever questions they might have. But also as a parent, and ultimately, for me, what I wanted at the end of the day is what do my children want? And if they chose sport, great, because I wanted sport for all of the things that the book says, to build resilience, to help them overcome adversity, to teach all of these life lessons that I think sports has to offer. And now as a coach, that's exactly what I think I'm supposed to be doing as the coach. In front of, whether it's the men at NYU, or it's the women's team that I work with over the summer, or maybe it's a youth team that I'm working with, what life lessons can be taught through this experience that this person is having with me as the leader. Thank you.
Kim, do you wing it at halftime, or do you write notes down? I don't know if these are notes or just but seriously, you've got notes, right? Halftime? Or do you just go in and wing it?
No, there's always a conversation about what are we going to coach at halftime. And it's usually 2 or 3 points.
Yeah, I have to make 2 or 3 points, because otherwise I just go in and I'm screaming blood and thunder. So it has to be organized for me. So I tried to do that tonight. And the first point I wanted to make was, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm interested in sharing my perspective from being the executive director of New York's biggest soccer club, most comprehensive soccer club in New York City. But I thought when I read the book, the deeper I got into it, if we could use our friendly tool AI, and I would put in DUSC, the acronym for Downtown United Soccer Club, for every time it mentioned any organization or sport, or a DUSC parent, anytime it said a basketball parent, that would be an incredible book for me to give every parent when they register each year. So instead of our parent guidelines, we could actually work with more than just a game, because being in a club in New York City, there are some unique challenges, but the commonality of so many of these issues and the lessons or the solutions that are in the book as well were so consistent with us. And I do want to mention some of the differences as well. And we have some really great soccer people here today. I have to call them both out. We have Steve, who's a Red Bull scout and who worked at Met Oval, and is a really good friend of mine. He's sitting next to me. He's one of my favorite people in New York City soccer. Sam Rosette.
Austin.
Oh my gosh, but you're wearing the red shirt, so, and that's news to me too. So, and I'd rather go to Austin than would it be New Jersey. Awesome. But next to Steve is, that's true, that's true. One of those, one of those not highly paid, one of those not highly paid college recruiting support people. But Steve did it out of the London game, which is true. But next to Steve is Samantha Rosette, who is a professional soccer player who grew up in the Bronx and played in Europe, and now is currently playing for a local USL team. So really great to have them in the room, and they can speak to these things as well. Is that the most unique thing about New York City soccer is the space constraints. And so, as we talked about, again, there's so many things that I can see in this book about being not just the DUSC executive director, but also from the lens of being a soccer parent as well, which everybody else spoke about also. But that is such a unique constraint about New York City, is where are we going to play, and how many different permit holders do we have to deal with? And you know, we had a little bit of rain today. Well, we have to cancel on Pier 26 because rain makes it really slippery with injuries there. Or well, so pretty unique in that regard. But otherwise, I think we're not that much different than I think the suburban soccer club, on Long Island or in Westchester and whatnot. So a lot of those common things. What I thought I might address is some of those things and how they relate to our club, some of the challenges, and what are our greatest challenges. And DUSC started 40 some odd years ago as a recreation soccer league, played at Pier 40 and J.J. Walker. Many of you know that little park there. And we still play recreation soccer there on the weekends, but Dusk has now grown to be, we're in the MLS Next platform, which is the highest level on the soccer side, and the Girls Academy on the girls side as well. So we have teams training at J.J. Walker still, but we'll also have somebody at Poly Prep in Brooklyn. We'll have somebody at Randall's Island in Queens. And so, and of course we have as many of our younger age groups located J.J. Walker, Pier 40, and downtown. So building community was easy with half a dozen teams in 1982 when we all went to J.J. Walker on Saturday mornings and whatnot. Nevertheless, I think as we have grown, and the professor spoke, I think, pretty clearly about this, the intensity of the environment also created a greater intensity of that social network as well. So much so that one of my main issues I deal with every year is, well, my daughter may not make the U12 team that she's been playing on since she was 6. And the parents aren't as concerned about the tearing of the social network as they are about, well, my kid's going to be on the B team, which of course nobody calls it a B team, all right? But it's interesting, and obviously we see those things happening, but it was really reaffirming to see that. And also for us is, how do we keep community when we're saying, look, it's developmentally appropriate, which it is. Steve can attest to this, Sam can attest to this, any soccer professional will, that as you develop, you need to sometimes maybe play in an older age group. Or, you know, they use bio-banding in the leagues we play in now, where if you were a late year birth date, and they use these, Steve, do you know the metrics they use to measure the kids' height and weight so they can play in a younger age group?
Peak height, velocity, all that stuff?
Yes, right, so that they could be in the best developmental environment, and we support that, and it's not just data supported, it's in the best interest of the kid, but it is so hard at times to sort of rip those fabrics of connection. And so for us, it's how do we build that community with our values in a club that we're not as big as some big suburban clubs around the country, but it's the biggest in New York City in terms of registration numbers and programming. And that is a constant challenge. And one of the challenges we've had recently is we have applied 4 or 5 years ago to get into the MLS Next, which is the highest platform for youth soccer to play in. And we've also applied for the Girls Academy, which I also believe is the highest level for girls to play in. And there are a lot of people within the club, some who were in the rec league sphere, some who were in the, again, I'll use this term, B team, or we call it tier 2 sometimes. What do clubs usually do though, which we did? Use colors. Nobody will know the blue team is the A team and the orange team is the B team, right? So a lot of those families bristled at well, what do you mean? We are going to national tournaments? Well, the tuition I'm paying for my orange team kid is going to help, those kids go there, and oh, you're recruiting all kids to get scholarships, and we're paying for them. And so that, again, also really stresses the fabric of the community within an age group or within a team. And so we've had a lot of discussions from board on down in our, perhaps I'll get to this as well, though I'm liking my ramble right now. We have a committee called Soccer for All, which is how we make sure we're providing financial access. It's need-blind financial aid. We give out over $500,000 a year in scholarships, something we're committed to. We work really hard to sustain. So, yeah, and I lost my track on that. So to keep those values with all these shifting narratives of moving kids up, of joining these leagues, we've had a real tension that we've had to address. And I don't think we've necessarily found all the solutions to it. We did things like, we made sure our, and I'll keep using the term, orange teams were invited to media day, just like our Girls Academy teams are. We make sure the person who's responsible for our social media account does a lot in, yes, I know, it's not something that was when I was, many of us were growing up and playing. But that, you know, we have no teams from this level who are being shown on your Instagram account. And so building community means a lot of different things. What we do at Dusk, or try to do, is to have as transparent communication as possible. And the way for us to do that is to have our parents become intensely involved. And that is a scary thing to say sometimes. And there are clubs around who say, no parent involvement. So when I joined Downtown United about 8 years ago, and came in as a director, that was something that was very clear to me, that parents were involved. But there was a structure. We have a committee of about 9 people who give their, I like to say, time, talent, and we always ask them for treasure as well, but certainly their professional experience. We'd like to have an attorney, people who are in finance, people who are in health and safety type. So we have a broad coalition on the board, but we have committees in those areas as well. A committee for each program, for rec, for academy, for health and safety, for soccer for all, just to make sure we're sustaining that. And that's where we provide those voices, so we have as much transparency as possible. And it is not easy. I think it adds, it's very difficult at times to navigate that, but I also feel in the same way, and I think this comes out in the book as well, that potentially can be the greatest strength of the club. And I don't think, we have about 5,000 registrations a year in the club, and New York City physically prevents us from growing our numbers, because we could say we could have a 3rd team in every age group, or we could do even more weeks of summer camp, but the lack of field space is puts a ceiling on that for sure. So one of our main initiatives, and this is something we speak about and have put as a priority for this season 25-26, is to make sure our competitive values mesh with our community values. And so it comes back to another massive part of the book, which is culture. And so for us, it's important that we have great coaches, it's important that we have support individual coaches, performance coaches, and that list can go on, but having the perspective of the families in our club, giving them a voice in these committees, I think will help us to find some of the solutions and to stay connected to the types of things about life lessons and that you spoke about, that what are the benefits of what seems like a crazy industry right now. So I think I'm going to, I do want to talk about accessibility. Are we running late? I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap it up. So I'm going to leave it there. I will say one thing, because we talked about this and I love talking about it, is Eric's son and my son played at the same club when Steve was there, Met Oval in Queens. We live uptown by Columbia where I used to coach, and I feel one of my son's greatest experience of playing for that team was, one, the diversity of that group, which came all over New York City, and the guys that he had to commute with in the subway and learn how to take the M train in Bushwick, and for them to have a really great group of people in that organization was just, honestly, I could not imagine finding an environment like that in anything but playing soccer in New York City. It's truly unique, and thanks for having me.
Okay, Kevin, let's bring everybody up here. And I'm glad you ended on that note. And I promise we'll get a chance to talk about accessibility too. The last thing you said reminded me of a theme that you kind of referred to, Bill, but that I think the pretty high level of satisfaction that you find in the community. Now it's possible if people who aren't so satisfied opt out and aren't available to do interviews for your book because you don't know how to find them. So maybe there's a biased example that way. But there is this shared experience that I think a lot of people involved in this world have of kind of joy and transcendence you have and great moments that you don't get in your ordinary life. You talk about relationships, you see your children grow. You know, in some ways for people who get involved in this, to parent, to be a family, become so tied into this world that it's hard to pull them apart. So let me just, I have a couple things I wanted to ask and then I want to open it up to a lot of people who are really interested here. First thing is, many of the big positives all call attention to things your children learn, resilience and community building, kind of life-making lessons. Those things happened before we had an industry. Those things used to happen in your public sports club. My soccer club is $6 a year, the Omni Club, and then we all played in school, and we got those benefits in. So one thing I'm curious about from your perspective is the industry part of this adding something to enhance the experience? Is there something more we're getting, or is it just that it's kind of helping us find the top tier players? Is the industry adding something? And I know this is a thing that a lot of parents who I meet who are curious about it, unfortunately, get asked. Can you opt out of it and still support a child who wants to be an athlete? In other words, if we set up an industry that's kind of effectively a monopoly, so that as a parent, you have no choice but to pay for the club and the trainer and all the other stuff. Because if you don't, your kid's going to be out of the big anyways.
Those are great questions. Just to your first comment, we were very surprised that essentially everyone we talked to, people whose kids stopped when they were early teenagers, people whose kids stopped after high school, people whose kids played college, pretty much 100% people we talked to ultimately said we're glad. They didn't say there weren't complicated things. There were complicated. They were glad. And one of the things that we found really interesting was that from the outside, talking to people, there was a sense that whole world of kids sports is crazy. And a sense that there are these crazy parents, like, I don't know, you watch sitcoms and there's always the parent on the sidelines screaming. Now, of course, all of you have been to games, there's always the parent on the sideline screaming. But it turns out that it's actually only like one. It's not the norm, it's not who everyone is. And everyone knows that there's that person there. And what we found most interesting was everyone just sort of accommodates it. They don't challenge it, they let it go, they kind of marginalize the person. So it doesn't end up undermining their sense of satisfaction. But I think it's largely because of the second point Eric made. There is a monopoly. You feel like if somehow you challenge, and we heard this from parents all the time, if they challenge and want to do things different, they worry the kids won't have opportunity. And they don't want to do anything that's going to stop the kids from having opportunity. It's very hard to have an opportunity for the kid to play more competitively and to play. If what the goal is for them to play beyond high school, it's very hard if you're not bought in some way to the semester. I guess I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I think it's very, very hard. So maybe it's a near monopoly. I guess I also would say benefits of the industry, I suppose there are probably more opportunities. There are more kids at more ages that have chances to play. I just was looking at this because baseball is the one that I know best, and I know we have soccer next week, so it's sport. I was looking on the train on the way down here. There's like 10 different organizations that claim to have national championships. You all know the Little League World Series, right? But there are like 10 different organizations that do. And they do. You go to their website, they've got a national championship. And you qualify to get in it. And so there are lots more opportunities to play very competitive sports because of this industry. But it comes with all these costs as well.
Well, I would just like to add that I hate and love at the same time that the industry has become so big and powerful because, particularly in soccer, the more investment that we've seen in soccer, the more it's helping a lot of people, especially when in Title IX, all of these things are happening. It's helping our national teams become better. I coach my daughter. Hopefully my daughter will be a soccer coach coach and so coach her kids, it just facilitates this idea that we're going to be competitive at soccer on the world stage, which I love. But I also, this is a big topic in soccer, is that the cost barrier is huge. And I just wonder, are we leaving the best athletes behind because the barrier to entry is so large that they can't get out. So, you know, I kind of have this hate-love relationship with the cost of doing business in sport. And I just want to mention, because I think it was an important point, I've coached a lot, I've counseled a lot of different types of levels of soccer, and one thing that was brought out in the book that I will 1,000% agree with, and I've always told parents, when they come to me and they say, well, you know, what should I do, and you know, where should I go, and I say, well, what's your end game? Like, you got to know your end game, you got to know your why, and I can't answer that for you. You have to know what the end game is. If it's to get a soccer scholarship, then let's talk about the data for that. Because the data is pretty clear. It's like a 4 or 5% chance, whatever level you're looking at. And all of this extra money that you want to put into your kids' development in sport, I'm telling you, put it into their academic curriculum. Because there's way, way more money in the academic world, hopefully that's those things, than there is in soccer scholarships. The numbers are very clear. And so that's what I tell parents, is focus on the sport. All of this sport gives all these life lessons. Focus on the academic, because there's a lot more money that it's going to unlock better opportunities for your children.
But your kids are going to have less fun, and you're not going to go to Marriott hotels on the weekends. There's something else going on, right? There's the social and cultural allure of it.
There's no question. My daughter's at Emory. I am astounded at the parent group and how invested they are in the team and the tailgate parties, and they're traveling all over the country to follow the team around, like on the side.
Yeah, so I want to give Kevin a chance to talk about access, but it is raising the question about the money, which is such a hard thing for us to think about. That I think a lot of the parents understand that in terms of investment in their kids' future, it's pretty irrational. But if the investment is not just a bet on their kid being college, but it's also like, I like this lifestyle. I'm going to enjoy this ride. I'm going to complain about it. It's going to drive me crazy. I'm going to fight with my spouse. We're going to neglect other things. But we're going to do this thing. But there's something alluring about it for a lot of families. And it's sticky, even though there's something completely irrational about it. Hold on. I just want to give Kevin a chance to talk about the access point, the accessibility point. Because the pay-to-play issue really is significant. And I know a lot of the clubs, scholarship money doesn't have a lot of it by comparative standards. But for a lot of families, it is a real burden. I want to make the industry.
I'll try to be succinct in this. First of all, Kim, bringing up the women's national team and access to girls, and we do know a lot of the top leagues are financially driven, and yet it does also have this benefit of it is blowing the ceiling off, for opportunities for girls. And that has happened in our generation, which is incredible to see. And I grew up across the street from Emily Pickering, the first scholarship player at UNC. So that was a long time ago. So there are some really positive aspects of it as well. We see schools like Success Academy who are trying to do that. There are girls clubs I've seen that are trying to give free tuition. At Dusk, Right to Dream. In our club, we are working hard to get sponsorship to help us to sustain those levels, so we don't just have to keep the pay-for-play model exploding. And one quick note about the experience, because it also made me think of my experience when I was my son's age playing high school soccer. We were state champs on Long Island. Well, a lot of us went to play college soccer, but I would just say the whole thing, for the most part, was fun. And we still have a group chat with that group and whatnot. I could not necessarily say that about my son's experience, though he would never trade that. It was hard. It was really hard. And he says, Dad, I learned how to do hard things. You know, whether it's running from the M train quarter mile because if I'm late for practice, I get sent home, or whatever it may be. Or he learned, you know, that he also has it a lot better than half of his teammates. And I'm not so sure I would want my 15-year-old to have that. If somebody said this is what's going to happen, I might have been, no, protect him. But yeah, there are some auxiliary benefits that come out of it. But yeah, it's monolithic. So.
Right, you want to make a quick comment? Let's do that.
Yeah,
And then I'm going to open up the floor for all of you.
Very quick, sounding like a sociologist, but I am one. We talked to all these people about spending money, and one of the things that we found was that it's much more culturally acceptable to say you're spending all this money because you think it's an investment in your child's future than it is to say we as a family have a great time going to Marriott's and wherever to go watch a soccer game. So, and I think they both. I think it's true. I think people have a good time. It's fun. They're with their friends, their adult friends. The parents are with their adult friends. The kids are with their friends. But what became the explanation that almost everybody told us was, we want to believe it's rational and that it's an investment, even if they might have known before.
For the record, it's actually the courtyard inn. Floor is okay. Hold on. Can you raise your hand? I'm going to take a few at once. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
I have a question and a comment. My question is, do you believe sports should be mandatory in schooling?
Okay, hold on. And then we're going to take another question here. We're going to take a few questions here.
After hearing all this, I'm like 80% tempted to call both of you industrialists. You work nominally for nonprofits, right? But like some of your parents of 17-year-olds are into you or into sport at this point for 6 figures, you know, including all the hotels and travel and non-mandatory, mandatory tutoring, in addition to the annual, you know, league fees, right? Some of your players are into you for 6 figures a year, because that's what it costs to come to NYU. But you're also like, you know, you're the bestower of dreams, right? You can help kids get $14,000 off the university background or whatever, right? And you can put people on a like well-lubricated slide like straight to Wall Street, right? Or into the film industry, because NYU is what it is. So are you an industrialist, or is being called an industrialist a slur?
Awesome. That's a first.
I think sports should be mandatory.
Okay, so yes. Okay, you'll take that one. The answer is yes to you, and that's the answer.
Well, I know, right?
I think the opportunity to play sports should be available to everyone. I don't know that it should be required.
I don't know, nonprofits are so messy. It's hard to align that term with industrialist. Also, it makes me really uncomfortable, but just to be totally honest. And I'm not exactly sure what the broadest definition of that would be either. So I'm going to say hopefully not. And I think, and I know there's some Dutch people here who would also say they see that, of course, a nonprofit, we do our best, but it is, it's still a nonprofit.
I would say that I coached Division III at one of the most expensive private institutions out there. And so I have a very unique type of prospect that comes to NYU, but I want to give them props because being a student athlete at NYU, just like Amherst or a lot of this is not easy. It teaches them it gives them such a gift if they can do both a student and be an athlete at NYU. It gives them such great tools, life skills, all of these things. They are just volunteers and they're spending like enormous hours dedicating themselves to this sport in addition to these high academic demands. And do I give them the path to Wall Street? Not really, because I don't have a mission ability at NYU. I actually have to, through Division III there's a clear barrier, and I do not have admission ability in NYU, so I have to identify prospects that, number one, the most important thing is, are they academically qualified for the university? Can they gain admission, right? Okay, so I can give them a pre-read, I can say this looks good. If you want to apply to Stern, it doesn't matter if you get 1,600, all APs, I say it's risky, because I don't know what Stern wants. It's like, you have to be the best of the best. So they have to gain admission into NYU on their own. But obviously this network of being at NYU and these great schools and colleges, plus being an athlete, just opens a lot of opportunity. I will definitely do that.
All right, more questions. One and then two. Professor Hoynes, did you look through the lens of power and authority and coaches in different age groups and how that influences current parents' decisions? All right. Yeah.
As the father of a 7-year-old who loves soccer, but also loves basketball and anything else he can do with his feet or his hand and any sort of ball or anything. So, I'm curious, just to, like Eric, you mentioned it at the beginning, just around specialization and so early, and how to think about that. How do you guys think about both at dusk, but also in your research, and how do you think about it as a recruiting, or not recruiting, whatever. Specialization separate.
The pathway at dusk used to be, or more consistently was, kids would start in the rec program, in the community program, so that was maybe twice a week. But even in the last 8 years since I've been at dusk, people want to get into the pre-academy before even starting out on the rec level. So parents are actually asking for more of that. We actually, our technical director really wanted to hold back on that, but to a certain degree we said we need to, one, deliver what our families are asking of us, and also our peers are taking our players, are recruiting our players or whatever. So it's definitely a trend. What I like to say is, one, make sure you play where it's the most accessible space for you. When your kid's 7 years old, the coach does matter, but it also matters that you're not taking 90 minutes out of your day to go and travel across a different borough or whatnot. And I think it's the older age groups, when you get to, in soccer, it's the 11-a-side, where those demands become greater. And the specialization sort of kicks in. One of the other unique things is we change our training cycle 4 times a year, and I know the dusk parents here know this, and it drives us crazy, and it drives you crazy. I understand that, but that's not by choice. That's because Hudson River Park says permits end here for the winter, and New York City Park says, well, no, permits change and start here. And so you may say, you know what, my kid's also going to play volleyball and take violin lessons, but then your whole dusk experience bombs that because of our field allocation. And that's, it's an unfortunate reality. We even, on certain levels of our teams, have talked about integrating other sport training on like a 4th day, realizing how important that is with certain individuals. We've actually hired performance coaches who simulate those types of movements so that we don't get injuries, calls ACLs or whatever, or overuse, which was referenced. But that's professionalizing it even more. I realize that, but that's where we're maybe very much.
I'll say one more thing before you go to Power and Authority, which is that you're going to buy Bill's book and you're going to learn a ton about the structure of this, and you're going to get all this wisdom from coaches. And what's going to happen is when your kid is 8, you're going to hear from another parent who's going to tell you about this program that's just for certain kids. And they've heard that the kids from this place almost always get into the MLS Next teams. And then your kid's going to tell you that their best friend is so you're now going to have these new inputs, which is like your kids' social expectations and interest in being with their friends, and the prospect that the people who are really serious about this and like it are going to go to this other place. You can either pursue that avenue, or you can kind of stay where you are and take your foot off the gas a little bit, and then who knows what's going to happen. And it's hard as a parent to deal with that kind of information. And then there, I think, is kind of what you want. Like for us in our family, our kids now is a college soccer player, but there wasn't really an expectation until much later that was in the realm of possible. It was more like, how do we make sure that they feel really happy about the thing they're doing? And they got more and more intense and serious and committed to it over time, until it was like there were no options. The kid was going to do the most intense, serious thing that they could do. But you do find yourself pegged to these other social experiences around you, and they're probably especially in New York City, but maybe everywhere, because we have this achievement culture. It's not just sports, it's music and theater and these other things. It's not just sports, it's hard. The experience that why it had with dad is hard. I think it's a larger conversation about we're making things pretty hard on our kids. They're going to face those choices, and it's really dizzying. I don't know what those can do to kind of broker those conversations in an honest way. Maybe might not be the right purpose for that, but our experience is that we carry these things really privately, and it's a hard thing to bring up in public forums.
And I'll just say to that, we did, the theme that emerged most clearly from the research was that early, that means say at least mid-teens, not late teens, but early breadth of experience and later specialization was what we found most helpful for their kids' sense of satisfaction, for their success moving forward as young adults, for the parents' sense of satisfaction. And that was in the face of pressure at a very young age, under 10, to decide your own way. So if you can hang in there and not coerce your child, but have your child have opportunities to pursue them even in the face of all the social pressure, I think it will. And this is related to authority. So coaches have a lot of power in this, and a lot of parents and kids experience maybe it's not a boss, but it could be a young child and it's your first experience of that kind of authority figure, because it's different from a teacher. There's something about a coach that's different from a teacher. The way they control your time, the demands that they put on you, and parents, we found, often really struggle with the authority that coaches have. I actually just had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine whose child is a first-year college athlete who was really unhappy with what's going on and wanted to call the coach. And I said, no. He's a college athlete. He's got to talk to the coach. He's got to deal with the situation. But all the way through, starting at a young age, all the way through high school, even into college, there is in some ways a power struggle. Parents want what's best for their kids. They want the coach to do what they think is best for their kids. Coaches want what they think is best for their team, maybe not individual kids, although hopefully those things align and overlap. And we found a lot of parents and coaches talking about that ongoing kind of contest. It didn't reveal itself as a contest, and they didn't talk about it later. But this ongoing power and authority struggle over sort of who's making decisions and who's shaping the experience of often like I would say the parents who navigated this most effectively recognized the expertise and knowledge of their coaches, but also had some agency as parents, and didn't try to take over everything, but sort of tried to find some kind of a balanced interaction until the kids got older, in which case most of them realized that was hard. Yes.
I have a question.
Hold on, let's bring in some other voices.
So I have a coaching question that kind of follows on from that. Coaches are educators in really important ways, and one element that I wonder about in my own son's development and my daughter's too now is the training for coaches. I mean, in what ways are coaches now trained as educators, or are they only trained in the sports realm? How does that work?
And then behind you.
I'll have a comment to make, so I'm not sure it's appropriate.
I'm gonna let you make that.
Really?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
take the power of a coach.
Thank you very much for this conversation. It's fascinating. I was thinking that the early professionalization of sports as well, so 15 is the new 20, 10 is the new 15. The landscape of sports is completely different with NILs and things like this, so sports is definitely more than just a game. For a lot of people, it's revenue generating, it can save a family, it can contribute to a lot of different things, like an escape. It keeps kids off the streets as well, so it's definitely more than just a game. But then we're seeing that the level is increasing massively. So you have Lamine Yamal playing at 16 years old in the national team, being one of the best players in the world. These 17-year-olds playing in the EuroLeague. You know, you have great talents. So I find it really hard not to understand as well sometimes this other side of sports, when it's not just something that we do for development of our children, but when children have a real goal of becoming a professional athlete and they don't have the opportunity to just take it easy, because if they're not completely locked in at 14 years old or 15 years old, there's another guy or another girl who's completely locked in and who's going to get the opportunity, because today at 16 years old, with the internet, with everything, you're all over the place, and that's it, you had your opportunity. So I find that maybe to your question just now, how we organize sports, youth sports, from the perspective of the adults who are taking care, making sure that it's a safe environment, that the agents, that the people who are making money out of it are under ethical control, is going to be really interesting as well.
Such a great comment, and there's this young female player named Zora. She's the only female playing MLS. She's a female soccer player, 14 playing the boys team. She made it. She's quite good. I evaluated her for U.S. national team scouting, and I ran into her parents recently. Their heads are spinning for all of these reasons that you just mentioned. She's so good already at 14, and they're getting bombarded. She happens to have passports that will allow her to play in European countries, and so Barcelona wants her, this team wants her, and I of course want her to stay with the U.S. national team and play for our women. And they're asking me, like, what do we do? And you know, my advice is, if you feel like you're in a good environment, you feel like you're getting good coaching, you feel like the people around you have the best interests in you, you feel like you're developing as a player, please enjoy life. Go to your prom. Like, I was so much fun to go to her prom and like learn how to drive a car here and not be immersed in this high stakes professional, where a lot of people are also trying to make money on you, what you're talking about. So those players are in a different type of categories. And then you have all of the others who like see this on social media, like, oh, I want to do this and I can do this. Buying the personal trainer, getting into this, fully immersed into this, trying to get into these paths. So I appreciate your comments. And it's Adam Sullivan, 15 years old, started down in who's that team? That's it. Yeah.
We have one girl who goes to Brooklyn Tech. She plays for Ireland's U17 and U19 national team. She spends 2 weeks there. She plays for Brooklyn Tech. She comes and practices with us. She plays with our MLS next 2019. Her life is intensely crazy, to speak to what you're talking about. And but I will say there is some definitive light at the end of the tunnel. A colleague of Kim and myself, Emma Hayes, who is our national team coach, has made it really clear that she intends to change the culture, not just within the national team, but within the youth setup as well, and that to make sure that joy, happiness are part of the coaching curriculum. Whereas now, Steve, you can attest to this, you know, whereas now it's this overly expensive licensing. You know, your A license at least $5,000 to get your A license as a coach, so you can coach in one of these leagues. Whereas traditionally American sports, there's no such thing as a license for a baseball coach or a football coach or a hockey coach. This is uniquely our cost of error, I guess. So, not that it is important for safe sport and things like that, but the good news is that Emma is going to blow this up, certainly on the girls' side in the U.S. women's national team. And so we look forward to, we should take part in that with her, make sure she knows. So.
How about this question about education?
Yeah, I feel like I'm talking to the floor here, but I think that I personally have experienced coach, and I think it's super important for coaches to continue their education and know the best practices. And it is enormously expensive to get your coaching license, which again I hate. This is a true number for a young coach to spend a couple $1,000s to get a license. I think it's hugely important. But again, it's a barrier. It's a barrier to entry. It's a barrier to making our young coaches better. It's so important. I'm in an institution, NYU, where just the health and the well-being of student athletes is paramount. So there's a lot of information given to the coaches. There's a lot of resources given to the coaches. I want to give Kevin props too, because I told him this a couple years ago. I went to the coaches convention and I happened to pull up to a bar one night. I know, coaches convention bar. And I was talking with a couple of his young female coaches that I know that he goes out and he recruits female coaches into the club, and they're just openly talking about, they probably didn't know I knew you, but they were talking openly about how much the club has educated them and helped them grow as coaches and made sure that they went to coaching school and they were using like all the right buzzwords for the age group that they were working in and talking about the practice sessions. And so it's very important for parents to try to, as much as you can, educate yourself on what is the club environment, what is the culture, what is the player development plan, and are the coaches licensed, do they have oversight, like all of these things. It's like, it's so hard to be a novice parent in this environment.
Just to sharpen it a little more, that's super helpful. And also, when you're learning to be a coach and you're getting licensed, how much of the training is about educating the full person versus creating something what
I personally think that our licensing path for U.S. soccer and Florida and United Soccer coaches, they do a good job of talking about. It's really like the holistic person that you're dealing with. And, it's about, for me, it's always been about life lessons, because that's what sport meant for me. It's like lifted me up so much in society, the social mobility for me to the max. And so I have that lens, and when I'm mentoring young coaches, which I do, I make sure that they have that lens too. It's like, this is a person that you're dealing with. This is like sports, important to win, all these things. This is like a young person that you're dealing with, and it's very important what we say and how we treat those people.
And that's good to hear. I guess what I'll be concerned about as it becomes more and more of an industry, and see it more used by leagues, is if you're a coach, is your standing in your club, is your path to promotion, is your future opportunities tethered to your win-loss record in the championships, or does your players have to say about you as a the way they touch them? Does that matter at all? My guess would be the old system is probably more favorable to people who are maybe old people. And the danger that we're going to get into this when we get off losses. So the virtues might be less valuable, but I don't know if it's true.
I think there is one thing that is different. In the old system, most of the coaches didn't have any training at all.
That's fair.
So the coaches today have much more training, and I think it often is sport specialized in it. But I got licensed as a high school coach in New York State. It was all about player well-being. It was nothing about the sport itself. And where I teach at Vassar, all of the coaches are faculty members, and they see themselves as educators. And I would say 30 years ago, I think most coaches didn't see themselves as educators. Okay, to your point, even the conceptualizing coaches as educators, I think, is important first step. Now, if it turns out in high-stakes youth sports, winning is what matters most, I'm not sure how it filters down to that, but I think we've made some advance in terms of these types of things.
That's a good perspective. We're going to do just a lightning round. It's a few hands. We're going to take a few more questions. Please make them brief. We want to make sure that everyone's got time to get their book signed. So let's go in the back one, and then two, and three.
I'm curious, not being a parent, but the potential long-term impact, right, as we're seeing, I'm a millennial and kind of this first generation of people who were raised in this pressure cooker world where you have to get really good. Now we're seeing Gen Zers come into the workforce and burning out and being really, really afraid of feedback and working hard. What are the conversations about the long-term impact on how these children turn into functioning adults in society as we continue to grow the expectations and, to your point, the social media around it, where they think they can be amazing and maybe they can't?
Thank you.
Kind of a related question. I'm kind of curious about what the status is for like community sports, right? Like again, I remember a time when the barrier to entry was relatively small and everybody can be involved. I totally agree with everything that my experience, and I think everyone's experience that this creates. It's a public good, right? It's something that people benefit from, and society probably benefits from having more people that have the kind of values that that sports engender. I guess another way of saying it, what happens to the lower income bracket of mediocre kids, right? Obviously, if you're good, maybe there's scholarships and things like that, but like, if we think this is something everyone should have access to, is the monopoly kind of swallowing all of that up, or are there still opportunities to do that? Do they just do something else?
Good comment for me.
Very quick. I'm very bewildered by this buying and selling $70 million for a Swedish soccer player. There was a time when sports meant character and team solidarity, and now it's just big business, buy and sell creatures, and I'm just very bewildered at all that. In cricket, it's the only sport I know that still maintains. Do you consider that a sport?
I'm going to say yes, for sure. Okay,
Because
so you
it
got
still has an ethical, moral, component where they mean something to be on a particular team. They don't buy and sell.
I didn't know that. That's interesting to know.
Yeah, and they have a concept called declare, which is so alien to an American mentality. You can look it up, but it's a very noble concept.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what we're going to do is just we're going to go down from Tim down the line, and then we'll end with you. So everyone can last one.
Because sport was so impactful for me, I think sport, no matter what level it's being played, is so valuable. I don't care if kids are out playing sport and it's the worst soccer team that I've ever seen. I don't care, because they're out, they're doing something productive, they're gaining physical activity, all of these life lesson things that I'm talking about apply, like even in that environment. So you don't have to be at the top level, $70 million transfer player. You don't have to be at this level, I believe, to get the value of what sport brings. You can be on the worst team out there, but you're out there with your friends and you're making these connections and your parents. All of these things are, I just think, so valuable. And so I will coach at any level. It can give me the CT, whatever they call it, the yellow team now. Because for me, it's not about winning and losing, especially at the younger ages. The only thing that's winning and losing is when you get to the World Cup and you're playing for the World Championship. Okay, now we're talking about winning and losing. This is the most important trophy.
Just to address the financial accessibility part of that, at dusk, it is need blind by program, so it can be recreation, it can be a summer camp. You do not get financial aid because you are the best player. It's need blind financial aid, and we do it as much for soccer camps as we do for academy or travel. So, and can you just rephrase the end of your question there? Because I had a good answer, I want to capture it again.
Basically asking about the potential long-term impact on the identities of these kids are in a little bit of a pressure cooker now?
So, I have two sons. My older son was a good player, played club in college, and is now becoming a coach. And he's Arsenal maniac, and he loves the game. My younger son, who's been referenced here, played in the MLS Next. We went to college, played. He loves his teammates and the culture there. He doesn't, if his friends are watching soccer, he'll watch. It was more about his experience. I don't know what that tells you, except for me, I see that son number one just finds joy through the game. Son number two found life lessons. So, yeah, I don't know.
Good data.
Before I answer, I just want to thank Eric, Mike, panelists, all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. I should have said that at the beginning. So thanks, everybody. I would say these are related they're connected in important ways. To Aaron's point, in many communities, there are fewer resources for recreation and youth sports. That's just the case. It's because many of the people with resources have left. And it's because the public sector is shrinking. So it is a challenge in many communities. And where I live, where there used to be thriving local little league, there's almost none. And that's the thing that costs like $60 a year. And this is happening with recreational programs all around. This experience of having need-based financial is amazing. And I would love to think that's happening in many places. And then I would say just a link to your point is, at least for what I'm going to call professional class or maybe upper middle class families, it's part of a larger experience of what some sociologists refer to as intensive parenting, which is a broader pressure cooker for kids, whether it's art or music or theater or sports or the business club or whatever it might be. And the sports just become part of that, where you're supposed to excel at a young age, focus yourself, your parents are going to invest a lot of resources in you, and you're going to be the best. I do think it's a different class experience. I don't think sports stand out, but I think sports are part of this broader phenomenon that I think we probably need to try to grapple with. I'm not sure we will, but I think we probably would benefit from grappling with that. And being a parent who was in that class, probably I didn't grapple with it.
Before you join me in thanking this great panel, I am going to act like the coach and the referee, the owner of the room for 6 minutes. The rule here is going to be that a lot of people are going to want to come up and say hi to Bill, congratulate him on the book, which you should do, but I'm going to escort Bill directly over to